IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I'm Rakshith Shetty, a research analyst at the Takshashila Institution, and I'm here with my colleague, Ananya Desai.
Hi, I'm Ananya Desai, Assistant Program Manager at the Takshashila Institution. In today's episode, we will be discussing the One Nation, One Election model that has been one of the hot topics of discussion in India in the last few months.
It really has been. So, if you're new to this topic, let's start with the basics.
In a One Nation, One Election framework, the idea is to conduct simultaneous elections for all state assemblies and the Lok Sabha. Essentially, elections at two levels, state assemblies and Lok Sabhas, would be harmonized to take place concurrently. Under this model, voters would participate in a unified voting process where they cast their ballots for the Lok Sabha and the state assembly on the same day at the same polling booth. The streamlined approach would mean the establishment of a new Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabhas, all operating on the same timeline.
That's interesting. But this isn't a new model that's being proposed, right? India did have simultaneous polls during its early independence.
Yes, so the inaugural elections in 1951-52 were actually conducted alongside all Vidhan Sabha polls. And this practice was even maintained for the next three Lok Sabha polls in 1957, 62, and 67. But this trend got disrupted in 68-69 due to hung assemblies in certain states. Then we had Lok Sabha's premature dissolution in 1970, which led to fresh elections in 71. And 5th Lok Sabha's term extended until 1977. Subsequent Lok Sabhas in 77, 80, 89, 96, 98 and 99 faced premature dissolutions also, mirroring similar situations in various state assemblies. Currently, the Lok Sabha elections coincide with assembly elections in 4 states: Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. Despite discussions predating PM Modi's tenure, no realignment of elections has occurred so far. The Election Commission of India has expressed consistent support for simultaneous polls, and they even mentioned it in their 1983 annual report and reaffirmed their stance in 2022 in a meeting with the 22nd Law Commission, who had also proposed the restoration of simultaneous polls in its 2018 draft. The ECI contended that with necessary legal amendments and logistical preparations, of course, it can effectively conduct simultaneous polls. It is possible. The 107th Law Commission report in 1999 had also advocated ending the quote-unquote cycle of elections every year, and they suggested separate legislative assembly elections should be an exception, not the rule. In 2015, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Personnel, Public Grievances, Law and Justice endorsed the plan with suggestions to address potential challenges. They got support from a bunch of parties. However, the Indian National Congress, National Congress Party, Communist Party of India, and All India Trinamool Congress rejected it as an impractical and undemocratic idea. In 2017, a Niti Aayog paper proposed a two-phase transition to simultaneous polls, beginning with the 2019 Lok Sabha elections, which we know have already passed. Although the last general elections saw no such shift, subsequent synchronizations have occurred, especially in maintaining a common electoral role.
But Ananya, is this a feasible model? Or rather, do you think it's the right approach to adopt?
So we often hear the phrase that it was a good policy, it had good intentions, but it was just implemented badly. And this is frankly a very flawed approach to understand or analyze a policy. The idea is to always approach a policy in the specific context of what it aims to achieve or what it was drafted for specifically. For this, we can break down 3 parts of the anatomy of a policy: the vision, mission, and goals. The vision is what a policy is intended for, or what it is meant to achieve. The mission is the roadmap for how it will achieve the vision, and the goals are like step-by-step milestones or tasks involved in the mission to achieve the vision. Now, when we apply this framework to the One Nation, One Election model, we can check for how feasible it actually is. The vision, of course, is to reduce election costs and not keep the country in a constant state of elections. And the mission to achieve this objective is the one nation, one election model of simultaneous elections. One of the goals would be setting up a committee to review and study the matter. In this case, it would be the One Nation, One Election High Level Committee, or HLC. Now let's look at these three anatomical parts one by one. The vision is to reduce election costs, but isn't that essentially prioritizing the economy over democracy? The mission is to conduct simultaneous elections, but that is arguably not the best way to reduce election costs. There are multiple arguments that can be posed against the idea that simultaneous elections would reduce election spending. First, when state elections are conducted separately, it means that officials and security personnel are deployed for them at their respective times. If we synchronize these elections, it will mean we need more personnel to be deployed at the same time. So, will this not increase the costs? Secondly, people living away from their hometowns or wherever they are registered to vote, are they not going to travel back to vote all at the same time across the country? Do we have the infrastructure to support or manage that? Thirdly, we will also need to procure a significant number of electronic voting machines to ensure seamless simultaneous elections. Will that not also increase costs? One proposal to tackle these problems would be having an online mode of voting instead or in addition to in-person voting. But that would come with its own set of problems of digital security, citizens' access to internet, or mobile phones in general. And creating such barriers could even reduce voting rates in the country. When we go into the last anatomical part, that is the goals for the policy, and look at the HLC that has been set up, I'm not sure it was intended for a balanced study of the matter. The government established this committee, led by former President Ramnath Kovind, and tasked them with examining and proposing recommendations for implementing simultaneous elections. There was a Gazette notification in September 2023 that sort of tried to justify the need for this model. It spoke about how, since India strayed from simultaneous elections after independence, or rather after initial years of independence, elections are held almost every year, which leads to massive expenditure by the government, which is, of course, true. And, of course, diversion of security forces and other electoral officers from their primary duties for long periods. Disruption in development work, of course, goes ahead. To tackle these issues, the HLC has a pretty comprehensive set of objectives. This includes examining necessary amendments to the Constitution, providing solutions for challenges like a hung house, defections, or no confidence motions, suggesting safeguards to maintain the one nation, one election cycle, and addressing logistics related to electronic voting machines. This, of course, is a very ambitious task, if you ask me. Now, my skepticism has to do with the composition of this committee itself. There was only one opposition leader from similar ranks. While the committee was being put together, one of the members was Congress leader Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary. He had actually consented to be on the panel before all of the names came out, but after that he declined. He said that the terms of reference have been prepared in a manner to guarantee its conclusions. And that does seem to be the case. It seems like a very majoritarian, one-sided panel to possibly conduct a balanced study. Next, the committee had no representation of the states, even though this model would affect both national and regional parties. It is also odd that a former president is being assigned somewhere by the government. A president occupies the highest constitutional office once. Also, in November 2023, Ramnath Kovind publicly asked all political parties to cooperate with this model in national interest. If the committee is not done with its report yet and has not confirmed its findings yet, how can they possibly affirm that this model is in national interest, at least as yet?
If this model was in place at the very beginning but phased out, and it has been repeatedly discussed since then, why do you think there is this sudden emphasis on this matter? And why now?
Well, this does seem to have political reasons. We are approaching elections. The model was in the ruling party's 2014 manifesto. Now they intend to have it in place by 2029. If the government does successfully advance the One Nation, One Election constitutional amendment, it could be a powerful tool to disrupt opposition strategies. State assemblies collectively have 521 seats. State assemblies collectively have 521 seats, and the state-level competition and larger number of seats will make it difficult for seat sharing at the assembly level. Also, top-level clashes to the cadres at assembly level will make it difficult to stitch seat-sharing pacts at the Lok Sabha level. This would even make it hard for the opposition to unite against the ruling party. Holding synchronized elections can blur the distinction between Lok Sabha and state assemblies in a country where voters seem to be used to adjusting their electoral preferences for different levels of political arenas. Though there is no real evidence yet indicating that voters would consistently vote for the same party in both polls, that is true. But we saw a similar scenario in 2018 in MP, Karnataka, and Rajasthan, where Congress secured victories in the state assemblies, but BJP dominated in the states during the Lok Sabha elections just months later. Mamata Banerjee had called this model a design to subvert the Indian constitutional arrangements that is aimed at converting the polity into a presidential system. This is a very important possibility to consider whether or not we know it's true.
Correct.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break.
What is the constitutional validity of this model, considering that it would require amendments to be accommodated, right?
Implementing simultaneous elections would require a certain degree of, if I may say, disregard for the Constitution as it is today. Because introducing a new model entails its ongoing maintenance, right? Maintenance that we have failed at in the past. After independent India's first 4 elections, sustaining this model requires the establishment of legislatures with fixed terms, including parliament. Consequently, if a government were to lose the confidence of a legislature, it would either need to be retained in power or replaced by a similarly unrepresentative one. The idea of freeing the administrative apparatus from conducting periodic elections might not necessarily result in a remarkable boost in the efficiency of India's bureaucracy. It's worth noting that between 1946, when the interim Congress government was formed following elections, and the first general elections in 67, simultaneous polling occurred throughout India except for the assembly elections in Kerala in 1960. Implementing simultaneous elections, of course, would need constitutional amendments, like we've discussed, requiring a 2/3 majority in parliament and ratification by at least half the states. Some essential amendments would be to the term of the House and dissolution of state assemblies, as well as Articles 356 on President's rule and on collective responsibility and no confidence motions. This, however, presents a challenging path due to opposition presence across multiple states. Amendments to the Representation of Peoples Act 1951 are also on the agenda. Overcoming hurdles like ensuring sufficient EVM availability, polling, and security staff remains a challenge, despite substantial work in these areas over the years. And of course, this model has been discussed before also. We're just reviving the discussion considering the upcoming elections. Advocates may point out that the idea has been under consideration since the current ruling party came into power, which would give them ample time to develop responses since 2014, since that's when it was in their manifesto. However, the timeline hints at a more urgent approach by the current regime. The HLC held 2 meetings on September 23 and October 25, 2023, and they were informed that letters had been sent to 6 national, 33 state, and 7 unregistered but recognized political parties seeking their suggestions on the matter. Before all this, the 21st Law Commission had categorically said in its draft report in August 2018, in the run-up to the 2019 general elections, that simultaneous elections could not be held within the existing framework of the Constitution. Apart from constitutional amendments, they would also need to change the Representation of Peoples Act 1951 and the rules of procedure of Lok Sabha and assemblies. The Commission had also emphasized that the potential benefits of simultaneous elections, highlighting cost savings, reduced strain on the bureaucracy and security forces, and the assurance of timely policy implementation, because it would be allowing the administration to focus on development rather than frequent elections. The 22nd Law Commission has shared its perspective with the Kovind Committee, although these views have not been made public at this time. From the parties who were asked for suggestions on the model, the Trinamool Congress plainly called it undemocratic and anti-federal. And about public savings and administrative efficiency, the first point surely would be, especially to a statutory body tasked with maintaining the superstructure of laws we are governed under, that economy does not trump democracy, like we said before.
Right. But do you really think that this model would not have any ripple effects if implemented?
It would actually, and it gives rise to a lot of questions. What will this mean for regional parties? Will national level issues take precedence over state level or local concerns, especially when parties campaign for votes? Because there is a high chance that national parties will be taking the stage primarily during the election season. We can only hope that media channels would balance their news coverage between national and regional parties as well as concerns, but that is frankly a very idealistic view to hope for. The 2018 case, where MP Karnataka and Rajasthan voted Congress at state level and BJP at the center, shows us that there is a certain level of consciousness in voters to separately consider national and local issues. And this can also erode the popularity of a party or its leader. And this is only one of the many possible impacts at the regional level. One of the arguments of the one nation, one election model is that it will help reduce voter fatigue because the country seems to perpetually be in the election mode in some or the other region, which is true. I would say the model would lead to a new kind of voter fatigue, rather, where they will be overwhelmed by the number of parties campaigning, and it will be even harder for citizens to keep track of national and state level election trends. This could even lead to having more ill-informed voting practices, while voter demographics have already been low in the country.
Right. But one really important question, Ananya, what will actually one nation, one election mean for India's federal structure?
Well, the model would mix national and state level issues, like we said, both in parties campaigning and in voters' judgments.
Mhm.
This would not be good news for the electorate or for India's federal structure. Article 1 of the Constitution calls India a union of states, and the use of the word union emphasizes states' unity despite differences. Union does not mean uniformity, and confusing it as such would be a very aggressive integrationist approach. Currently, the model seems to challenge federal principles, evident from its very title. The assumption by the present government that the nation is inherently one and therefore should have one single election is logically flawed. The nation comprises sovereign legislatures, and their terms enjoy constitutional protection under Article 172. Similar to Parliament, state legislatures are mandated to continue for a period of 5 years from the date appointed for its first meeting. As of now, there is no uniform date for the initial meetings of state legislatures, and making any attempt to modify this arrangement would be incorrect and would also have repercussions. We have landmark cases like the case of Ananda Bharati versus state of Kerala and Golaknath versus state of Punjab, where the Supreme Court has consistently asserted that federalism constitutes the basic structure of the Constitution. And treating federal institutions such as the state legislature as subservient to the union executive is unacceptable. The whims of a government should not take precedence over well-established constitutional and legal principles.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, folks, wrapping it up as we roll towards the 2024 elections. The one nation, one election model talk is in the air, and it's a bag of mixed opinions. Some say it's the way to go for smoother elections and saving a few bucks, but others are side-eyeing the potential impact of how things roll in different states. Looking back, it's not the first time we have flirted with this idea, and now it's back in the limelight. As we head into the election hustle, it's like trying to find the right playlist, balancing efficiency gains with the beats of democracy and regional flavors.
Thank you for tuning into All Things Policy. We will see you in the next episode.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.